Good morning. Welcome to this morning's webinar. It's flagging operations on two-lane rural roads. It's Victoria Beal with the Ohio Ltap Center, and I have with me my colleague Ray Brushart, who is going to be your instructor for this course. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we get things rolling. First off, we're going to be accepting questions today in the question box. So if you've not found it yet in the GoToWebinar panel, please look for that. Just drop me a hi or hello or good morning or may the 4th be with you in there. It is May 4th. So that way I know that you found it. Also, we have items for you in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. We have for you a copy of today's presentation that Ray has put together. We also have for you a copy of the Work Zone Pocket Guide, and I'm certain Ray is going to discuss with you the fact that besides this downloadable copy, we do have it available as an app on both the Apple and Android stores. I guess that's called Google Play. And then we have in there for you a RON update. That's our Route of Navigation Job Aid series on designing your flagging operations. And last but not least, we have uploaded a copy of our Ltap e-learning catalog. We have over 200 different courses available for you on the e-learning system. So please, when you have a second, take a look at that. I'm certain that you'll find something in there that'll fit your future training needs. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ray. It's all yours, Ray.
All right, thank you, Victoria. And good morning, everybody. And so today we're going to be talking about flagging operations on two-lane rural roads. It's that special time of year where, we start getting out there and working on the roadways. And, we just wrapped up our 5-part webinar series on work zone traffic control and safety, but we wanted to also include a session on flagging operations, because there's a lot of flagging going on in Ohio, and we want to make sure everybody has some training and background so they can get out there and on our two-lane rural roads and do their flagging safely and properly. So today we've got a lot to go over. We've got to talk about flagging in general. Flaggers are critical to traffic safety, and there are consequences of improper flagging. And flaggers have very important responsibilities. And here's our learning objectives for this hour we have together. Hopefully we can gain a basic understanding of a flagger's qualifications and responsibilities. We'll go over the necessary equipment and apparel that the flagger must wear. And hopefully we'll gain realize the importance of proper flagging procedures. And we'll go over the signs that are required and even some optional signs. And we definitely need to talk about the proper flagger location. We'll also go over the uniform flagging procedures and how they are applied depending on the type of operation being performed. And we'll talk about the development of safety habits to maintain safe working conditions for employees and motorists around and through the work areas. And we'll also talk about how to design your flagging operation to be the safest it can be for different speeds. So why is flagging an important profession? Well, a big reason is because there's a lot of people depend on the flagger's clear guidance as they approach and drive through the work zone. So who depends on the flagger? Well, there's a whole list of people depends on the flagger: the workers, motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, children, and of course the flaggers themselves. And it's important that we follow standard and uniform flagging procedures. You don't need to invent your own way of flagging. Every flagger should be flagging the same way. And when we do this, you increase the motorist respect, you promote a uniform response, and you minimize drivers' confusion. If you're setting up a work zone on a county road here in Pickaway County, where I'm coming at you live today, it should look just the same as a as a work zone on a 2-lane county road in Knox County, whatever. So we want the motorist to instantly recognize what's going on when they approach a flagging operation. So a flagger, they must stay alert at all times. Those cars can come at you rather quickly, especially if you're working in the rural areas where you have hills and curves. You might not hear the motorist coming like you can in other areas. You need to face oncoming traffic, be highly visible, and you want to stand alone. You shouldn't be standing by where the work is taking place. You should be well in advance of where the work is taking place, on the shoulder of the road, out of the path of vehicles. You should be standing at the beginning of a cone taper. And not just anyone can be a flagger. You have to select somebody that has the ability to communicate instructions and to maneuver quickly, to control signaling devices, and the ability to apply safe traffic control practices, and to recognize dangerous traffic situations and be able to warn others. You also need to have the proper flagger equipment. So as you can see in the picture, we've got our flagger with the stop slow paddle, and the stop slow paddles are retro-reflectorized for night use, but they also stand out during the daytime. There's two different sizes of these stop slow paddles, 18 by 18 inches and 24 by 24. But if I was you, I would just pretend that the 18 by 18 does not exist and go with the 24 by 24. It's bigger. It's going to stand out more than the 18 by 18, especially if you're on a typical 2-lane rural road that has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. The 18 by 18 is there for lower speeds and lower volumes of traffic. It also is attached to a 5-foot to 7-foot high rigid handle. And here's a picture of the stop slow paddle. Got the white stop legend on a red background and the black slow legend on an orange background. How about flags? I get that question all the time. Well, can't we just use flags when we're out there? Well, the manual, when I say the manual, I'm talking about the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, Part 6, which deals with temporary traffic control. It states that the use of flags should be limited to emergency situations and intersections and low speed and or low volume locations, which can be best controlled by a single flagger. So if you have a planned roadway maintenance task, you should be using the stop slow paddle. Here's a good picture of the preferred flagger location on the shoulder of the road at the beginning of a cone taper. You should not be standing in the path of moving vehicles. How about this guy? I think this guy is doing it right. Well, apparently he's not, so a couple things wrong. You should not be parking a car at the flagger station. And that's just something for motorists to run into. And also he's blocked his escape route. So one thing a flagger should concern themselves with was they set up to do their job is to make sure they have a clear escape route if they have in case there is some errant motorist bearing down on them. How about this picture here? We have a flagging operation where we have there's no flagger present here at the beginning. He just got his stop slow paddle jammed down into a cone. And then the flagger himself is back here behind this truck. And he was thinking that this way everybody would stop and then he would just motion them around the curve when he thought they could make it. So that's definitely not the way to do it. He got a nice week off unpaid for that one. But we're going to learn about how to flag properly, and that includes having a buffer space and the flagger standing well in advance of where the any vehicles or workers are present. Here again is a picture of a flagger. They're up, there's no buffer space, and they're standing up where the work and workers are taking place. And we do not want you to set up in that location. Then here we have a picture of a flagger standing in the middle of the road with his back to traffic, stopping vehicles. And we don't want you to get in the habit of doing that either. And then here's some more pictures. We have a guy sitting on the tailgate reading a book. So he's distracted, and he's not paying attention to traffic. He doesn't realize that there could be distracted drivers bearing down on him. And of course, we have a guy taking a break on the shoulder of the road as well. Looks like maybe he needs a break. That's one of the things that we talk about is don't leave your flagger out there standing in the hot sun for too long. They do need some breaks. Some more examples of uh, bad flaggers. Stand in the middle of the road, you're back to traffic. Okay, so a little bit about flagger training. Flaggers should be properly trained in safe traffic control practices. You shouldn't let the new guy be out there first day on the job, put him out there as a flagger with no training whatsoever or what the requirements are. Currently, Ohio does not require flagger certification or registration. Some states do, but we don't offer that here with this class. But you can receive your flagger certification by going to available training sites like ATSA, ATSSA, that's the American Traffic Safety Services Association. They have classes for flagger certification several times a year here in Ohio. You just have to go to their website and sign up. Also, you can check out the Ohio Laborers Union training. A little bit about the drivers. Let's talk about the drivers as they're driving down our two-lane rural roads that they could be driving at a high speed. 55 is definitely high speed. Anything above 45 or higher is technically high speed. And but the people driving those cars these days, we've heard about distracted driving. We have in this crazy world, we've got people under high stress that they don't want to be stopped, and we have impaired drivers, so on and so forth, all sorts of stuff. People yelling at their kids in the back seat is still the number one reason to be distracted, even with phones and everything else. So, as the flagger, we have to get their attention and guide them through the work zone safely, and we have to protect our fellow workers. And it can be difficult controlling drivers, and they want to be in control. They have places to be. They've got their own expectations, um, and we know that work zones are prone to accidents. And as you can see, we really need to get their attention and let them know in advance that we are standing out there flagging traffic. That's probably the main key is advance warning. And here's some other factors that affect drivers' abilities. Maybe it's the road. You see the pictures over there. You got, if you're flagging in the early morning or late in the day, you run the risk of the sun being in the motorist's eyes. And of course, they all have dirty windshields. That can really affect their ability to see you. And of course, impaired drivers, or maybe a youth 16-year-old driver versus an experienced driver, or maybe even, as you can see the picture, someone in their upper 80s driving. Maybe they can't see as well as they're supposed to. So these are reasons to never assume that a driver sees you. So the temporary traffic control manual has an entire section on flagger control that we need to know about because it has all the requirements. It's actually a state law that we abide by this manual, and it states that for the flagger, it says when operations are such that signs, signals, and barricades do not provide the necessary protection on or adjacent to a highway or street, flaggers or other appropriate traffic controls shall be provided, and signaling directions by flaggers shall conform to the OMUTCD, and that stands for Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Everybody working out on the roadway should be familiar with the OMUTCD. So we're going to go over the easy way to remember all the parts of flagging that's important to us. And we call that the ABCs of flagging. And the A stands for advance warning, B stands for be visible and alert, and C stands for control. So we'll talk a little bit more about the manual because it is so important, and not just for work zones, but for everything on your roadways that is all about traffic. So there's a part that's all about your permanent roadway signs. There's a part for your pavement markings. There's a part for traffic signals. There's a part for railroad crossings. There's a part for school zones. So it's important that you're familiar with all the different parts of this manual. There's 9 parts and 4 appendices. Anybody working on the roads needs to know about this and how to get a copy and or view it online. And then this is part 6. So this is where the requirements for flagging are located and any other work zones. So it says the Ohio Manual establishes the standards for design and use of traffic control devices on all public roads in Ohio. And it's the state law because it's in the Ohio Revised Code sections 4511.09 through 4511.11 that we abide by this manual when we are out there working on the roadways. And that comes into play, especially if there's a crash in your work zone, because if there's a crash in your work zone, it sometimes boils down to a lawsuit, and your agency could be sued because they set up a flagging operation incorrectly, or they left out some signs or other considerations that the manual speaks about, and that may have been the cause of the crash or helped. It was part of the reason for that crash happening. So inside the temporary traffic control manual, when you look up stuff for flagging, you will see the typical application number 10 on the screen. It's otherwise known as lane closure on a 2-lane road using flaggers. So it's on page 747 of the temporary traffic control manual. As you can see, it has a good picture of the signs that you need and the spacing of the signs, the length of your cone taper, shows an area there for your buffer space and things like that. Shows where the flagger is standing. And then on the next page, it has the notes page for typical application number 10. So you have to be familiar with the notes that go along with the picture. And so the notes page has a list of the standards, guidance, and options that are associated with this typical application. So the standards are the bare minimum. It's the shall condition. As you can see, there's only one standard, and it states that at night, flagger stations shall be illuminated except in emergencies. So you need an actual light shining down on the flagger at night. And then you have your guidance, which is the the should condition, meaning you should include what the guidance is talking about, unless you have some really good reason not to. And then the options show us how to make our flagging operation as safe as possible. And one of the things they talk about in guidance and options is the be prepared to stop sign. So even though this picture here doesn't show a be prepared to stop sign, it's just showing the standards. But the notes page talks about the be prepared to stop sign in the options and guidance. And so it's telling us that we really need to think about using that sign when we're dealing with high speed traffic or limited sight distance. So the ODOT roadway crews, when we're out there on our 2-lane rural roads, we always use that fourth sign, the be prepared to stop sign. And you put that between the flagger sign and the 1-lane road sign. So it's been studied and shown that, it really helps your work zone to be safer. So that's an example of guidance and options. So in the ABCs of flagging, the A stands for advance warning. So we have to let the public know that we're out there flagging, and we need to have all these signs installed before we start the flagging operation. So the first sign the motorists are going to see is the road work ahead sign. And if you work for a utility company or you work in a local government agency that deals with utilities, then you can substitute the utility work ahead sign in place of the road work ahead sign. The second sign that the motorists are going to see is the 1-lane road ahead sign. And then the third sign is the flagger ahead sign. It's a symbol of the man holding a flag. It used to be in words, it used to say flagger ahead, but we've changed that in the last 10 years to be the symbol. So if you have the sign that still has the words on it that say flagger ahead, you need to replace that with the symbol of the flag, man with the flag. And then here is the optional be prepared to stop sign. And so you really need to consider using this when you're, like I said, in high speed roadways, 45 and higher, and especially if you have limited sight distance like curves and hills. Let's see what we got over here. Okay, so another tip when you're putting your signs out is for you to place a nice shiny new cone beside the sign so it draws more attention to the sign. And then your signs have to be spaced a certain way. And so in low speeds, 40 miles per hour or less, then they can be 100 to 350 feet apart. And then in the rural areas and high speed, they need to be 500 feet apart. So you're wondering, well, where do we find all this information? And that's one of the reasons I have the handouts today. So let's take a look at our handout here. We have this is everybody in the class can download all the handouts, but this is on page 17 of um, it's called Optimize. The optimized guidelines for traffic control in work zones. If we go to page 17, then we have this nice table here on the right. And these tables are very important because they show us how to space our signs in the advanced warning area. And as you can see in the rural area, the distance between each sign is 500 feet. And then as we go down the table, it then shows us how to space our cones properly, our channelizing devices. As we take a look at the 2-lane road type, and we go across, and in the taper, our cones are 20 feet apart. And that's different for multi-lane roads. In multi-lane roads, a merging taper, the cones would be the speed limit in feet apart. So if it was 55 miles per hour on a multi-lane road, that the cones would be 55 feet apart at a maximum. And then as on our flagging operation, they're a maximum of 20 feet apart. So we can put them closer together, but the maximum spacing is 20. So from a distance, when we do that, it makes the taper look like a wall of cones to the approaching motorist, and that helps them to realize they need to slow down. And then uh, as we go through our work zone, we get past the taper and into the buffer space and workspace, and we can increase the spacing of those cones to 2 times the speed limit. And again, that's maximum. And then the downstream taper, they're back to 20 feet apart. And then the taper itself, this final table, helps us to define 2 different parts of our work zone. We have the taper. So this, the first column here is the speed limit, and the second column is for 2-lane roads. So as you can see, no matter what the speed limit is on a 2-lane road, the length of it's called a two-way taper, is 50-foot minimum to 100-foot maximum. And that's different from all the other types of tapers. See, an emerging taper at 55 miles an hour, emerging taper is 660 feet long on a multi-lane road when we're closing a lane. But it's still only 50 feet to 100 foot max on our 2-lane flagging operations. And then the other thing this table is important for is this final column over here, flagger station / buffer. So this is the length of our buffer space. So at 55 miles an hour, we want there to be a buffer space of 495 feet. That's the distance from the flagger to where the work area begins. And that's based on stopping sight distance. So that means that if someone is coming around a curve, and of course we don't want you standing around a curve, but if they look up from their phone and there's the flagger and they didn't see the signs and they're still going 55, then it takes them 495 feet basically to come to a stop. So they'll probably come to a stop sooner than that, but of course as engineers we like to throw in some factors of safety. So but the thing is, it's for an errant motorist that is completely surprised by the flagger. So we want to do our best not to have a surprised motorist. It's a bad thing if they get all the way to the flagger going 55 miles an hour and didn't see any signs or know that the flagger's standing there. But this is our last ditch of an emergency fail safe to have that buffer space so that they can get stopped before they run into any vehicles or equipment or people in the work area. Very important to have a buffer space as part of a flagging operation. So this is where you would find the information you need for when you're looking at typical application number 10 back here. Let's go back to the picture. So if I zoom in on it, in the sign spacing part of the table, it said A, B, and C. So here's A, B, and C, and that's the space between each sign. So that's 500 feet when you're on a 2-lane rural road. And so this red icon is the flagger standing at the beginning of this taper. And as you can see, the table said 50 to 100 feet for flagging. So that's the length of this taper. And then the spacing of each cone was mentioned in the second one. So let's say you have a 100-foot taper, you need it to be 20 feet apart. So basically you're going to need 6 cones because you start at point 0 here with 1 cone, and then you have another cone every 20 feet out to the center line. So that's how you would come up with 6 cones would be the minimum number of cones in a 100-foot taper. All right. So here's some more examples of sign spacing. They might have got on the left picture, they probably got the spacing correct, but you know, the motors have to be able to see the sign. So if they're coming from a distance, this utility pole will probably block the view of that sign. So you got to think about that when you're installing the signs. And over here on the right, they have another no-no. They've got the signs right in the middle of a sidewalk. So the sidewalk is not there for signs to be located on. We have to think about pedestrians and making sure they have a place to walk. So you should be setting the sign out here on the street or very, closer to the curb. Okay, usually I show some videos here, but of flaggers, but actually I wanted to show something new. Being that this is 2021 and not 1973, we've come a long ways, and having different tools out there to make our work zones safer. So one of the things I wanted to show off was our website, the Ltap website. So if you work for a local government, you should be quite familiar with our Ohio Ltap website. So here's our, Victoria, are you seeing the website?
Yes, I
So,
am, Ray.
okay, good. So there's a lot of resources on our website, and some of those resources deal with setting up your work zones and about flagging. For instance, if you click on resources over here, we've got lots of things under the resources button. We've got one of the main things is a direct link to the Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. You just click on that and it goes right to it. The other thing is on the next row is the guidelines for traffic control in work zones. You can download it or even search for the app in Google Play or your what's the i thing for iPhones you go to for your apps. So those are some things under resources. We have a highway safety button to read about. Another thing we have on our website is technical assistance and services. When you click on that button, you've got a lot of different things here for you to use. But one of the things I put in your handout is a tech brief that we call a route of navigation series. And but we've created lots of different, we call them RON updates for route of navigation, but they're tech briefs or different things. But if you go to that page and scroll down, and you can click on category, and it breaks all the RON updates into different categories. But we have work zone safety as one of the categories. So that would be towards the end there. But here's designing your flagging operation. If you click on number 8, then we have several more work zone safety tech briefs. You can another work zone pocket guide link, and we have a thing on mobile operations for 2-lane roadways, and that's very important because as you're setting up your signs for and the cones for a flagging operation, you're basically in a mobile work zone at that point. So if I clicked on this, then you would see that it opens up and it talks about the mobile work zone operations for 2-lane roadways. And so as you're out there, you need to abide by this typical application number 17, for when you're setting up your signs. It's very important that you stay safe as you're out there installing your signs. So this is how you stay safe. So here's the notes page for mobile operations. And one of the things is a standard, very important, that says shadow and work vehicles shall display high intensity rotating, flashing, oscillating, or strobe lights. So it's a state law that you have your high intensity strobes on as you're installing your signs. And you got to think about sight distance. Are you disappearing around a curve as you install these signs? Then you need to have a shadow vehicle to stay in the straight section so that you don't surprise the motorists as they come driving around a curve or over a hill. So there's options on here to make it as safe as possible. Maybe you can think about having a deputy sheriff be your um, shadow vehicle with their lights on. Um, if you're in a rural area, or a village, if you're in a village or city, use the village police as a shadow vehicle. A truck mounted attenuator on the back of the shadow vehicle adds safety. So there's it's just like flagging. So mobile operations on a 2-lane road has its own typical application. It's number 17. It's on page 760 of the temporary traffic control manual. So you have to realize that you have to abide by that typical application as you're setting up your flagging operation. So there's a RON update dedicated to helping you understand that typical application. Okay, so another thing that we have is we have our own YouTube channel. And so we've uploaded lots and lots of training videos. You can even view our past webinars and things like that. But if you're looking for something new to add safety to your flagging operation, one of the things that I've recently discovered is portable temporary rumble strips. And the Virginia Department of Transportation, they've always stayed up to date on portable temporary rumble strips, and so you can actually watch this video. And let me see. You gotta watch out for the advertisements, but anyway, I'm just gonna. You probably can't hear this, but I just wanted to show you what they look like. Um, so you could. It's a short 7-minute video, but they go over what the requirements are for um, when to use them, when they're required to use them on 2-lane roads, and how to place them, how to be safe as you place them, and things like that. So let me see here.
Ray, I told everybody in the box that we'll send a link to this video out to them after the
Okay,
webinar's over.
so there's even a sign that says rumble strips ahead. It shows how to space them, and it refers to the studies that show how they really do make a difference in the advance warning area of your work zone. So that's these are just some of there's also, there's flagger training here, flagger training videos. You can sit your crew down, and if you don't want them to watch a replay of this webinar, you can sit them down and watch flagger training from the Virginia Department of Transportation. They have a very good flagging training video on there as well. So those are some reasons as to why you should be familiar with our Ohio Ltap website, because we've got lots and lots of really good resources on there. All right, so that was the advanced warning area to get your signs. And things in place, and then as the vehicle gets past the advanced warning area, then they arrive at the flagger station, and it's important that the flagger be visible and alert. In fact, you want to be visible when they see the signs. They should see you, the flagger, in the you know in the distance. And so to help them do that, you've got the proper stop, slow, paddle, but also the proper apparel, like the vest, and so that you really stand out. And here's some reasons why you really want to stand out, because there crashes do happen involving the flagger, and we need to make sure we're doing all we can to avoid that from happening. And so, again, they're listing some reasons: high-speed traffic, aggressive drivers, and of course, as we've noticed in the last year, drivers are actually more aggressive and they're speeding much more during the pandemic lockdown. One of the reasons is there's less traffic, and so they just have, for some reason, they're speeding more, and that's really, even though there's been less traffic, there's been more fatal crashes this year, significantly more uh, than the year before. And so it all ties to aggressive and speeding drivers, a lot of it, besides being distracted. So it gives you some, it says, after seeing the flagger, a motorist going 60 miles per hour needs almost 400 feet to stop. So can you believe that? Driver going 60 on a 55-mile-per-hour road? Who would have thought that? But I think we all know that there's certain roads that people do speed on these two-lane rural roads, and we have to take that into consideration. So that's why our sign spacing is 500 feet, and that's another reason why we also have a buffer space, and also our flagger is wearing the proper flagging attire, so that he really shows up. So here's a good picture. It's showing an example of an Ohio two-lane rural road. You got the hills and dips and all that stuff, and we want to make sure that the flagger is standing in the proper location in advance of the hill or the curve. You never take a position over the crest of a hill or around a curve. So a little bit about your safety apparel. This is mentioned right in the temporary traffic control manual. It says flaggers shall wear high visibility safety apparel that meets the performance class 2 or 3 of the ANSI ISEA 2004 publication entitled American National Standard for High Visibility Apparel and Headwear, and labeled as meeting that requirement. So if you have any question of whether or not your vest abides by this requirement, it should say so right on the tag of that vest. And this paragraph is taken directly from the temporary traffic control manual, page 647. So here's some examples of apparel that meets that requirement. And then here's some that don't meet that requirement. They might look bright, but they are not compliant. So it's very important that you meet the requirements. So like I said, it should say so right on the tag that it meets that requirement. You can see it right here. So here's an example of a flagger that's wearing the class 3. In the state of Virginia, they no longer allowed flaggers to be out there only meeting class 2. Here's class 3, which usually includes the trousers and has more retro reflectivity on it. So that's what class 3 is. All right, so then we talk about our taper of our flagging operation. And as we saw on that, the taper needs to be 50 to 100 feet in length. It's shorter, and the cones are closer together, so this encourages drivers to slow down. Like I said, it looks like a wall of cones to the approaching motorist. So the cones play a vital part in and getting the advance warning and getting the motorist to slow down. So you should never skimp on your on your taper area. You get yourself in trouble that way. So then we have the control portion. ABCs. The C stands for control, and so the flagger is a legal traffic control device that must be obeyed. And as you're flagging, we have some standard ways to stop traffic and how to release traffic and how to slow traffic. And so the manual and the guidelines for work zone traffic control, they both have these pictures in there of the proper way to stop traffic with both the stop slow paddle and also with a flag. So as you can see, to stop traffic, you got to point the stop side of the stop slow paddle at traffic and raise your left hand with the palm facing traffic, your right arm extended as you see in the picture. And then to slow traffic, you turn it around. It also shows with the flag raising straight up and down from your shoulder, arm straight out at the shoulder and down. You don't move the stop slow paddle either. You keep it slow or keep it stationary. And you want to face traffic so you can make eye contact with the motorist. And then in today's world, especially in rural areas, everybody drives a pickup truck, it seems like, or at least a minivan or some big vehicle, a big SUV. So sometimes, you may have to walk out to the center line, but that's only after you get, a large vehicle stopped, and then make sure that you've established eye contact with that motorist and they see you walk out to the center line, but not beyond the center line, and make sure that oncoming traffic can see that stop paddle as they approach. You're not blocked by that large vehicle. And then you got to return to the shoulder before you release traffic. So to release traffic, you remain on the shoulder, you switch your paddle to slow, and you use your free hand to direct drivers, and you do not wave the sign at the drivers. So you direct them as you see the guy pointing to the center line. And then sometimes you don't need to stop traffic, you just need to slow them down. And so you display the slow sign and you use your free arm to motion traffic to slow down, waving it, moving it up and down to, as you want them to slow their speed down. And when you do that, you definitely stay on the shoulder and not in the path of oncoming traffic. You do not want to become a target. So that is the location where you should not be standing. The most common way of flagging is with two flaggers. And so, they need to communicate, and teamwork is essential. So usually you have your two-way radios. And some things to point out about the typical application number 10. You do not see any arrow boards. There should not be any arrow boards on a two-lane road. That would distract the drivers from paying attention to the flagger. And it shows the buffer space between the flagger and the workspace. So here's a good construction, a maintenance of traffic plan that shows the spacing of the flaggers at says a rural road at 40 miles per hour. And then sometimes we can, there's other ways to communicate. If you can see each other, you can use the sight method. You have a signal when you're going to release traffic. We also have a flag carrying method as a like it's a last resort kind of method, or sometimes it's used if you're in our rural roads and townships. Sometimes they chip and seal a road and for like a mile at a time, and sometimes they'll use that method along with a follow vehicle to guide them through the long traffic, the work zone. In the sight method, both flaggers have visual contact at all times. And in a two-way radios, that's the most common. And just make sure that you've got some spare batteries. You don't want your two-way radio to go out on you. And with the flag carrying method, that's where you hand a flag to the last motorist that's allowed to pass, and then that driver will hand the flag to the flagger at the other end of the job. And that's the all clear signal. So again, that's a last resort method. Sometimes you need to add an advanced flagger, and that's where you have a really curvy, hilly road, and just to let them know that you want to be extra sure that people realize that there's a flagger operation ahead. Sometimes we can get by with one flagger and a single flagger operation, and that's okay, but you have to meet all of these conditions that you see here. A lower volume road, good visibility from both from both directions, a short workspace, and a short duration operation. Like you're only going to be there for like an hour at the most, and it says low speeds, so it's not a good idea to do this in a high speed situation. But if you are um, working on a single flagger operation, here's a good picture. It shows where the flagger should stand. You should stand directly across from the workspace on the shoulder of the road so that you can be seen from both directions. Here's a good picture of a single flagger operation here. And you've got cones at his feet to bring more attention to him. Again, you're never stepping out into traffic in this situation. Another situation is you have multiple flaggers. If you have a long work zone, you might have some intersections or busy driveways between flaggers. And so it's important that you have flaggers at each intersection. And it's also important that driveways along the rural roads, like for houses and stuff, that you put cones, you taper some cones at their driveways to make sure they can't enter the lane of traffic in the wrong direction. We have railroad crossings. You want to make sure that you don't allow traffic to stop on or right up against the tracks. You need to keep them away from the tracks a good distance. So it's very important that you do that. The nighttime flagging has its own requirements. You should have a glow cone and lantern to help you stop and release traffic. And of course, you have to have auxiliary lighting because that is one of the standards in the only standard in the typical application number 10. And you have to have the retroreflectorized paddle. So here's a good picture of a nighttime flagging operation. You see the night, he's got one of those flashing stop slow paddles along with the class 3 apparel. Emergency vehicles, sometimes you're out there flagging and an EMS squad or sheriffs need to get through right away. So we need to allow them the right of way as soon as possible, but still you may actually need to stop them if it's not going to be safe for them to continue. So those are things to consider when you're flagging. And we also need to be aware that crashes do happen or other emergency situations. We need to anticipate the unexpected. Be prepared to respond and protect yourself. You have your escape route you need to plan, but also what do you do when crashes happen? So when I say emergencies, I'm talking about drivers disobeying your command to stop and also crashes or accidents. And so when these happen, you got to immediately let your supervisor know and also call for help, but we also need to continue to control traffic and stay in contact with other flaggers. So here again is it's a bad flagger here, I guess I'd call them, because they're standing closer to the middle of the road, and by parked vehicles, they should be uh, more in advance of the work zone in this picture. So anyway, those are all my slides that I have for today. And again, to recap, we went over the where you can find the requirements for flagging in the temporary traffic control manual. I showed you how to get your own copy of that or view it online through the Ohio Ltap website, with other resources that you can find there. We went over the ABCs of flagging. The advanced warning area is very important with the signage. We talked about the optional sign for high-speed rural situations, the be prepared to stop sign, and the buffer space is very important. We showed you the tables that document the spacing of signs and cones, and where you find the length of your tape or length of tapers and the buffer space. And so, Victoria, do we have any questions that we want to go over?
Ray, there are no questions in the question box. I think it's because you've done such a great job um, with this presentation. Now, I do want to let folks know that certificates will be sent out within a week for those who attended this webinar. And we will also be sending out links to the handouts that are in the handout box. The other thing I wanted to ask everybody, if they wouldn't take a moment, please, when the webinar ends, there's a survey that's going to pop up on your screen. And even if you don't answer any of the first few questions, could you at least answer the last one and let us know what future topics you'd like to see in the webinars? We would really appreciate that. So thank you so much for attending, and thank you, Ray, for the great presentation, the great refresher on safe flagging, and we hope to see everybody safely flagging when we're out there driving around this summer. Take care, everyone.
All right, stay safe, everybody.